family vacations in the station wagon growing up, being enchanted by various movies. That's pretty much my background, and I share it with an increasing number of people, I think. Very lucky to be born in a prosperous Western country. There's always very horrible third world conditions on our planet, and it's only by luck that you are born into a better or worse situation.
Yes, touche, touche.
I was also lucky to have very supportive parents who made sure I was fed and educated, and my father was very artistically talented. Ended up being a lawyer, so he was very interested in pushing me toward, if I wanted to do any artwork, he was very supportive. It was a very vicarious experience, I think, for him.
So he lived his life through you?
Maybe because he could draw. He had some fun doing it, but he never had much energy for it after work, He did other things.
So what inspired you to start painting, and how inspiration has evolved over time?
My father's family was very closely associated with old Hollywood. There were always a lot of movies from the 1930s and 40s, either on TV or I would be taken to them. Old Disney films like Snow White and Pinocchio, the original King Kong, stop motion animation, The Wizard of Oz. I grew up on those films well before the entire world, was subjected to Star Wars in 1977. At that point, I was about 10 years old and already steeped in the language of enchantment. I mean, those other films, they get overshadowed by Star Wars, but they were already magical. And that was the imagery in my head, and those were my leanings, right? So I wanted to do movies. I wanted to do storytelling and animation and all of that. But as time went on, you realize that you need lots of cameras and $50 million and and all these other things. Like the rest of us, I was able to get a hold of pencil and paper. As I get older, I realize how much of this is actually only accomplished by pencil and paper. J.R.R. Tolkien did not make the Lord of the Rings movies. He had pencil and paper and wrote the books. And to that extent, we are all empowered by those two simple tools. And I think over time, I kind of got reduced to them. I'm making drawings and writing stories. I do have a novel, by the way. It's not published. I still work on it. It's actually kind of almost done. I just need to finish it. But I've always been interested in storytelling. My original aspirations toward film have been split into writing and drawing and painting.
But did you do any films?
Given that I could always pretty much draw and paint, I took art classes, and I was always, near the top of the class, or however you want to say that. So I went, wow, I'll go into film, but I'll design the monsters, the creatures, the spaceships, the environment, do production design. So I went to art school in order to make myself appealing and valuable to some place like Lucasfilm or Disney. I'll go to school, go to college, and when I'm done, I'll go work for one of these companies, help make more of these movies as time goes on. So I ended up getting an internship at the, George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic during college.
Oh, wow.
And I went there and I'm like, oh, wow, this is great, But some of it was immediately very appealing, and some of it surprised me. Some of it burst the bubble. Some of it I did not expect. I ran into artists there, painters. They said, well, I could always do art, but I didn't know what to do. So I work here. I work on other people's ideas, and they were fine with it. Other people said, well, I couldn't make any money at my own ideas. So I worked for George Lucas. Others said, hey, if you can paint and do this and make something of yourself, to hell with this place. And it depended on who you met, depended on their mood. I know other people really loved it. So I love making models, and this gives me a chance to do it and feed myself. But they were always working on someone else's idea, which is great unless you have a ton of ideas of your own, and is sort of a weird sense of conflict. So I was very torn. I was in there around, the people, and even got a chance to do things like sculpting monsters, making molds, sculpting teeth, casting them in resin, putting them in the puppets, painting skin, watching someone make fake eyes and learning how to do that, and really climbing in and having a very tactile experience with materials and creation of characters. Again, it was always someone else's idea. On the school side, my teachers were painters in and of themselves. The most famous of which was Wayne Thiebaud, as a California painter who has worked in the Smithsonian now, and his work has gone on to sell for tens of millions of dollars. He always claimed, and it's probably true, that there's a tremendous amount of luck involved because his imagery came to light at the same time at pop art movement in the United States. Other teachers, a guy named Wally Hedrick, a ceramic artist named Robert Arneson, oil painter Mike Henderson, all these people were a part of the California Bay Area movement. They really had an effect on me. The way Thibaut put it, says, I can't tell you anything about how to make a living at art. I can tell you how to make a life out of it because there's so much luck involved. And what can you do to pursue your own voice and at the same time feed yourself? I don't know. That's sort of a weird game, isn't it? Thibaut said that pursuing art, pursuing what's important to you and really doing something with it. He said there's probably a lot of that going on out in the middle of nowhere and out in the middle of the country. And he says, his quote is, we will probably never see it because of the way the art market is structured. Wow, because so much gets churned through what we think of as the art market, right? The galleries are like it's like the old producer system at the old studios. I got into Lucasfilm, and if I really fit in there, I could have been hired on to continue. And at the same time, I was like, wow, I kind of had taken interest in painting. So I was kind of split. I talked to my father about it, and he goes, well, that's interesting. You can move back in here. You come back home and live here as long as you're pursuing one of the two things. You can stay here and figure it out. And I was looking during the day to work in special effects in Southern California, and I had some inroads and some people. And at night, I made my paintings, and I took on portrait commissions. People like paint my children or paint my grandmother, and just portrait commissions. But that was worst of all. The experience was awful. So I went, okay, I'm just going to do special effects and make paintings that only I want to see. Storms, monsters, whatever. And people started buying those, which was even more weird, pictures of mountains and trees and landscapes and animals. But they started buying tornado paintings and shark paintings. That was very encouraging. So I kept doing that. All that predictable a pattern, it'll take off. You might have an art show and sell all the paintings, but the next art show, you only sell 2, and then you sell a lot, then you sell nothing, but then they sell later. It's very erratic. At one point, I had a show, and I was just kind of burnt out, and I said, here's the show, but you know what? Double all the prices. And what doesn't sell, I'll take home, and I'm going to go back and do movie special effects. And the gallery said, what? Double all the prices? I said, yeah, I'm done with this. But then all the paintings sold. And I went, oh, no. Part of me is like, what a great problem to have. But part of me was like, oh, no. Then you do it again. And Wayne Thibaut, at the top of his profession, would agree with this. He says every time it's like starting over. You have the art show and you either make a little money or you don't, and then you start over and start over and start over. And boy, doesn't it feel like that. Any one time could be the last time.
How would you describe your artistic style? How did you develop it?
There's, of course, a lot of contributing factors. Like any kid, very early on, you get impressed by people who can draw something and make something look like something. Remember when you were 10 years old and like, oh my God, that looks like a photograph. They're so good,
Yeah.
And I remember feeling that when I was very young, noticing the difference between a convincing Godzilla movie and an unconvincing one. Early on, you go, wow, so I developed the skills to make something look good. And I don't think there's really much point of addressing anything further unless you can be convincing with your image, whether it's a picture of a snake or a coffee cup or something. You go to art school and see if you can get something to operate on the picture plane. Or if you're making a movie on screen, or if you're a photographer on film, can you make something? Can you make it work? And, that was a concern through school. And once you can do that, you end up with the age-old question for any art student. Now what do I do? Once you can make something, that's a huge question, right? Cultivating and finding out and digging into yourself to find out what's important to you is intense, cathartic. There's some artists who can paint so well, and they never know what to paint, and they end up making more and more oceanscapes or more and more, landscapes or tree scenes, and they find a way to enjoy it maybe. But myself, my early paintings of tornadoes are very representative of a lot that we deal with here. Going out and making a Godzilla painting might have been an early impulse, but I think with tornadoes, I am making a Godzilla painting, and I'm using a very particularly American Godzilla. Those storms happen mostly here in this country. and making a little American townscape and making the big tornado. To me, it's like, wow, I'm making a Godzilla painting. There's something very seductive about it. It's like painting a giant oceanscape. There's so much natural tumult. It's very appealing. Then putting the little people at the bottom, like the painter Jacob van Ruysdael. He paints the big giant landscapes and clouds and trees and the little tiny people who are so small in contrast to nature. I was very influenced by him. I'd arrange those people on the bottom, and it just seemed then very intuitive to me that they should not be paying attention to the giant spectacle that's about to obliterate them. In arranging these, I sort of struck on a kind of orchestration that immediately to me represented the country I live in. This big giant threat, a sort of idyllic local life, and people who are either numb to the threat or they don't follow enough of the news to have the awareness, or they're poorly educated, or they know about it and are just sort of resigned to what the hell can I do about it. But as soon as I got that image, first few images of the giant storm and people not addressing it, I felt that I struck on something.
You did, yeah.
As soon as I made one, though, I went boom, boom, boom. I made 4, I made 5, I made 10. I went, I'm onto something, right? And I felt, wait, there's something going on here. And to me, it also addressed storytelling and filmmaking, what I originally wanted to do. It also addressed my deep interest in the sciences and the natural sciences, and a lot of things came together in single images. There is a great little interview with the music composer, John Williams, the film music composer. He has other stuff too, but he said that when composing these film scores, the ones that we all know, like Star Wars or Indiana Jones, he says, you have to come up with these little 5 and 6 note motifs, ban, da, da, da. And he says he spends by far the most amount of time with those, months and months, to get it right, but not just where you get it right or get it good, but get it to where it sounds inevitable. That's it, the word inevitable, so that when you strike upon it, you go, boom. It's almost like you uncover something that already existed. And that's the way I felt when I hit upon that arrangement in my paintings of the big, giant, spectacular threat, the idyllic life, and the people not addressing it. I hit on so many different things in a single dynamic that I felt like I'd come home. I'm like, here, I found it. I need to pursue this. There's been many versions of it since, and there's some developing right now.
I'm very fascinated by the first artists.
All of that is great.
Yeah, exactly.
When you get a chance, though, I do want to respond to something with regard to first artists.
No, tell me right away.
Okay. When you were listing there, and I remembered that in corresponding through text about a couple of your podcasts, I very much enjoyed the fact that you had a lot of material on the first artists and the cave paintings. And those, to me, are wonderful examples of the following. A problem I have now is that there's so much art made with reference to art. People see a Monet and they try to make flowers. People see Thibaut and they try to make cakes, and they sort of copy. The first artists, who were they looking to? Nobody. They couldn't. They were the first artists, right? They were looking at their world. They were looking at what sustains them. They don't know where these buffalo and bison and horses, they don't know where they come from. They're like, my God, what do we do? Well, we can ride them or eat them, or who put them here? They are going from their relationship to their reality. And the thing is that's what every artist even now has to do. And artists who get too inspired by other art, I find that they are sort of a watered down version of an artist. They're a diluted version of an artist if they're not taking from their experience of their life and their reality. And the first artists are the best examples of artists who take from their world directly. They will always be the best example. What are you painting? Well, I'm painting what keeps me alive. Literally, the first artist could say that. Too many artists now are not doing that. That's my intense feeling about the first artists.
People don't know about these early artists. They maybe heard about Venus of Willendorf. I'm trying always to tell people that there is more to it. We don't know anything about it.
Isn't the oldest cave painting now? Didn't someone find something that's almost 60,000 years old now?
Sulawesi cave. It's 54,000 years old.
They found a red painting of a goat or a pig or something in there?
Yes, Sulawesi warty pig. I covered it already in one of my episodes. It's called In the Dark. 45,000, then they found this older one that is 54, and I think they're pushing it even back and back.
That's so beautiful. The mold over the top, they were able to carbon date, and they went, well, if there's something 54,000 years old on top of the painting, that means that here you go, right? I think all of this, the related science and the anthropological and but be it the art and the biology, all of that early on were the same things. Religion and science early on were the same things, and religion and science and art early on were all the same things.
Magic.
Yeah, and that to me is extremely inspirational. I do a lot of the science reading best I can. I'm not that good at math. With regard to cosmology, it's not just where humans came from, but where did the planet come from? Where did the universe come from? And I read an awful lot about cosmology and black holes and time distortion and, general relativity and quantum mechanics. And it's also what leads to us.
How insignificant our petty lives are.
But there's an answer to that, too. It's insignificant and small. But at the same time, the scientists Carl Sagan and Richard Feynman would talk about this. They say, here's this tiny little planet. Sagan called it this pale blue dot, floating in this giant universe. But if you think about it, in a strange way, we have people on this tiny planet who are capable, to some degree, of also holding the whole universe in their head. You have people walking around now who kind of know what is 10 billion light years away. They kind of know the structure of, to some degree, like how a black hole works and how stars form and how stars die. And to carry that time span and what happens in that time span inside your brain on the tiny planet, it's almost like those people don't just live on Earth, they live in the universe, and they're contemplating to be so insignificant. And you look at a gorilla or a dog, and there's no way they'll know anything other than like the day is bright and the night is dark. But then you look at a Homo sapien, and it knows everything about the way the planets go around that star and that the sun is just a star. So we're insignificant, but how can you be that insignificant and carry also the universe in your head? That's miraculous to me.
Yes, we all have this within us, the whole universe. We are the center of the universe. There's no center of the universe. Everything is center of universe.
Every perception, no matter who you are, where you're perceiving from is the physical middle of the universe as it relates to you.
Yeah, exactly. I am the center of universe as well as you are. There is a beauty in it, but my personality is more cynical. So that's why I was more reluctant to say that we are insignificant in this universe. And I really do believe that our petty lives are very insignificant in the grand scale of the universe. Mm-hmm. The universe doesn't give a damn who we are and what we are. We will be forgotten in 500 years. If we are lucky, somebody will mention us. Just look at these first artists. We don't know their names. We don't know who they were. We just know they made some art, and by some weird luck, we have their art. What was my point? Yeah, I lost my point somewhere.
I think I get the point. We're kind of talking about significance in contrast to created meaning. It's like there is no meaning. We have to create it. Feynman said that too. The whole thing is meaningless and the universe doesn't care about you. So you have to construct that. And I think that's part of what art does.
Well, maybe that was the point. Let's create meaning of life through art. All of these wars and violence and petty grievances are so insignificant in the grand scale of things.
And so costly.
Yes. Let's get back to you again. Can you walk me through your creative process from idea to final piece?
Something I assign my classes is something I still take advantage of, and that is making lists, getting a piece of paper and making it important, not just a scratch note, not just a napkin at a bar, but sit down and close off stimuli, make a list of everything you love on one side and everything you hate on the other, and really dig. And it's personal and no one else is going to read it. But when you do that, things start to group themselves and you start to see things. And I had Wayne Thiebaud tell me personally to do this. I had even the writer, Ray Bradbury, told me to do this.
Oh, you met him?
A couple times. And I had, after a small gathering there was some writers and it was a radio show and he was on there reading a story. And afterward, there was maybe just 10 of us there talking with him after everyone left. And he started talking about writing and how do you become a writer? And he says, well, you fall in love with writing and take care not to fall out of love with it. And then he talked about making lists. And then years later, I heard Wayne Thiebaud say this, and even another teacher said, everything you love and everything you hate, so that everything important to you is in front of you, and go from there. And that's just one of the sort of overarching dynamics in my process. That list making is what allowed me to make those early edge of town paintings. They look like just a big tornado scene until you go, wait, how come no one's paying attention? Wait, isn't the storm too close? And you realize that I'm really sort of compressing everything into what's maybe a kind of terrarium. Or like, when people have a fish aquarium, and they have the little treasure chest and the fish and the little scuba diver, and it's all kind of compacted into a very accessible single moment. I see no end to that dynamic. My process, after all of what I just stated, has to do with thumbnail drawings. I'll go, wait a minute, what about a painting like this? Or what about one like that? There's these little 3 and 4 centimeter drawings that you make in your sketchbook, and you make a ton of them. What if the monster was here? What if the people were here? What if the sky was like that? And you're just drawing. And each of them takes maybe, 5 minutes. And I make so many of those. It's almost like I'm auditioning my own ideas back to myself, and the next day I'll look through them and go, oh, this one's awful, awful, awful. That one's good. That's awful, awful. And this one's good. So maybe I'll take those and the 2 that are good and maybe make some more little drawings and variations. And from those thumbnails, something starts to look like it might have a chance at composition and dynamic. Or maybe I'll make a larger drawing about 10 inches or 20 centimeters across and see if it still works. Or I'll make a copy on the copy machine and enlarge it and try to draw into it. And then maybe it'll kind of hit. I'm like, oh, this one kind of works. White out some areas with white acrylic and use some ink and move things around. I don't use Photoshop like a lot of people do. And I'm working from memory this whole time too. My own intuition and memory and just drawing skills. And I get it up to the point where I think I have something. Then maybe I'll go find a building that looks like the one in my concept. Maybe I'll go make a model or find a taxidermy animal or a cloud or something that looks like what I want and sort of group something together. I'll even cut out photographs and tape them together. And then when I have something, I go, maybe I'll enlarge it, put a grid over it and enlarge it and transfer it to a canvas and start. That's how the most complex images happen. And right when you get to the point of enlarging it, you realize that, wow, the same image doesn't work when it's 20 times larger. And so I keep it malleable. And maybe there's an element that I'll increase in size or decrease in size, and it'll have to sort of restrike that ground. And once I think I have it, I'll start the painting. And shoot, as you well know, even then it sometimes doesn't work. With all that preparation, I usually have some decent results. Other smaller paintings are the ones that take a day or 2, are often on impulse, and I hope to do some more of those soon.
I never knew how to paint a painting quickly. My paintings always take time. The longest one was 3 years. History repeats itself.
Oh, yes, I did see that. Oh, it's very large, too, though.
Yeah, it's 6 meters by 2. And unfortunately, I only exhibited 3 times in Gothenburg because there is no opportunity.
I'm curious with your painting. On the left, you have the figure, isn't it, from the Italian Venus painting? But it's on the left, I noticed, and I was wondering, the way we read things, we go from left to right. I was wondering if you plan that to be, for the left, to be kind of a birthing point for some of what comes on the right. Or am I reading into that, too?
You're reading into it because, to be honest, I started other way around because I'm left-handed. Okay. I start from right to left.
But conceptually, to have a birthing figure on the left, I was wondering, I'm like, intentional or not intentional? But you can see how I saw that, though, right?
Yeah. I didn't think about it.
It's another thing, too, about concepts in art. You could have an artist who has an idea or an event in their life that's so important to them that they paint something, let's say, and the painting ends up being really good because, it was so important to them. But in 100 years, no one knows what the story was or what the meaning was, right? But the painting is so good because of their conviction, because of the meaning to themselves, that other people are able to apply their own stories to it. And so the painting becomes kind of a mirror. And they look at, oh my God, look at the conviction and the gravity of this image. And they find themselves climbing around their own history by way of looking at someone else's results. I think that's important in art.
I don't know how to speak about my art.
It's hard.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know the English, well, he lives in England, Frank Auerbach, the painter?
I know.
There's the art critic, Robert Hughes, who's, I think, is just amazing. I read art essays and books by Robert Hughes, and I always agree with him. Yeah, very famous art writer, Robert Hughes. I have the book here, And I pass out this little passage in class because it speaks to what we like about the cave paintings, the Paleolithic art. If you like, I could read it to you. It's about 5 sentences long.
Yes.
And this is what Robert Hughes says about Frank Auerbach. He says, Auerbach's work suggests a way out of the morass of ambivalence and coarsened self-reflexiveness in which so much of the art of the last 20 years is foundered. He's talking about the 1970s and 80s, I think. It reminds us that painting may still connect us to the whole body of the world, being more than just a conduit for debate about novelty, cultural signs, and stylistic relations. What counts most in Auerbach's work is the sense it projects of the immediacy of experience, not through the facile rush of most neo-expressionist painting, but in a way that is deeply meditated, impacted with cultural memories and desires which do not condescend to the second-hand discourse of quotation. Auerbach's struggle is not to, quote-unquote, express himself, but to stabilize and define the terms of his relations to the real, resistant, and experienced world, which is what art must do, today as yesterday, if it is to be more than chatter. And how is that not the cave paintings, right?
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was so beautiful. And for him to write that about this work and have it remind me of what I feel about the cave paintings, that's why I pass it out.
How do you balance intention with playfulness while painting?
It goes back and forth, and there's always a struggle. And the only thing that gets you through the struggle is how important the final image is to you. You know, you want to get something right. Damn it, it's not right yet. So you have that on one side. And then, of course, like I tell my class, you know, you could bring on a painting after working on it 2 years and you go, hey, does it look spontaneous yet? Right? You are crafting that freshness and spontaneity. You could have brushstrokes together that work together, but one brushstroke is a year old and the other brushstroke is a half hour old, right? You have to keep in mind that a lot of that freshness is cultivated, and you have to create the look of freshness. It doesn't necessarily happen spontaneously. There are passages in a painting that can happen spontaneously. Frank Auerbach, the artist we just spoke of, he has, wonderful, speedy passages of thick paint, but he says, yeah, that one painting might go a couple years and then one day it kind of bursts. You kind of see it. And the final painting is what happened in 20 minutes on top of 2 years. If you work on a painting the right way, you'll get to that bursting point, and that bursting point will be a kind of spontaneous event. And so I search for that bursting point. I search for when the painting finds itself, and when it finds itself, it's usually pretty sudden.
But how do you decide when a piece is finished?
There's something you feel, and when you start to get it back from the painting, you go, oh, wait, I've achieved those relationships. When I look at this, it sounds the same as the thing that I'm thinking of. That's one criteria. The other criteria is that you work on it and you get it to a point where it's the best you can do, where all the moves you make are now sideways moves. Oh, shoot, well, it doesn't matter if that bucket is red or blue. It doesn't matter if the sun's up here or down. The painting is in a sense full, and any move you make, any change doesn't amount to anything. It's all sideways. Then you're like, well, that's the best I can do then. And so you just stop and you have to abandon it. And maybe you look at it and later on you decide if it's bad or good. Or someone says, hey, wow, that's great. And you're like, what? I got it right? You mean I got it right? Yeah. You start seeing a level of orchestration that speaks to what you intended.
How do you think your cultural background influences your art?
My cultural background is, like I say, just sort of, generic white kid in Southern California. While it's very comfortable, in some ways it's also very boring and prescribed. And in many ways, there's really nothing to draw from it. But I think my culture also has people in it that value education. And my education is very much of a Western tradition, a Western European. Going back, I learned Latin in high school. I got to read the Aeneid in Latin. Well, we couldn't finish the whole book, but we got the good parts, right? It values education across many different disciplines. And I think my culture got me to a point where it met up with what seems to be either my natural or cultivated sense of curiosity. I think curiosity is extremely key to succeeding at anything, definitely in the arts and sciences. And my culture offered me enough opportunity to pursue my curiosities. That is the connection. I was reading a quote the other day. It was someone famous, and I can't remember. This person, I'd forget if it was a man or a woman, said, I'm not so much amazed that a patent clerk named Einstein was able to pursue and solve some of the mysteries of the universe. I'm more so angered that somewhere in this world there's another Einstein chained to a table as a slave, and we'll never know what they can do. And then you go back, and that makes you think of luck, how the established pursuits and victories of Western civilization have afforded some of us an opportunity to pursue our curiosities.
I'm a teacher as well. I work as a teacher, just general art for the high school. I'm amazed that nobody teach these kids to be curious.
Yes, yes. Or they kill it, destroy it.
Today, I was teaching this kid. He was doing some monster that he had a dream of. The monster had the shoes, nice clothes, but instead of the head, it was beaming light with one eye. He dreamt of that. He is 17. So I told him, you should look Salvador Dali. And he didn't know who that was.
Wow.
And I gave him the reference to William Blake because he likes these monsters and dreams and nightmares. When he saw it, he was amazed and he went to the library and took books. But then his teacher came to me and said that I did wrong of telling him what he's going to do. And I never said you're going to do that or that. You do your own art, but this is inspiration. And this teacher told me that I trying to enforce Western art. I was very confused. I still don't know how to deal with this teacher.
Of course, there's more art in the world, but you could say, yes, I could show them more art, but we are a Western country and a Western school, right? You're coming from this, if you were someone in Indonesia or Japan, they would take out different art maybe. And you could certainly show some of the gods from India with so many arms coming out the sides of the body, right? And the elephant heads and so, and you can show that. You can show the goddess of death, Kali or whatever, right? If I mentioned it at the time, you would say, sure, add that on. I think right now it's almost like a bizarre reign of terror about what you can say and cannot say, and then shame and white privilege. And I get all that. You want to have awareness. You want to be inclusive and afford everyone an opportunity. But I think there are people who dislike their lives, or they're so grumpy, and that they've joined this kind of crusade and cause because it gives them an identity. And are they really passionate about improving inclusivity, or do they think of themselves as some sort of modern social crusader warrior? Those are going to go together a little bit, but you feel like you're part of a cause, but don't overdo it.
Yeah, that's why this teacher said, that's why we don't teach art history, because it's full with Western men. We don't teach history of art because everything is men.
Does she mean don't teach any art history?
Yeah.
That's crazy. And you think about it, the first time these things were discovered was, ancient Greece and then pursued a little bit in Rome, certain ways of drawing and depicting and sculpting. There's other cultures that do it, but the first naturalistic way, it doesn't matter where it happened. It could have happened in a different country. It's not exactly Western, it's Greece. It's a little north of Africa, a little south of Europe. It just happens to be there. And then then you got a superpower that comes in, Rome. And of course, they're like, well, we want to make some good stuff. Let's start with the Greeks. And so then it comes up, and then and you figure that's still in, central Italy, which is kind of the bottom of Europe and has a tremendous influence, right, from Africa. If you want to call it Western, fine. I'm talking to her now, they're the other teacher, but it's just recognizing where a lot of stuff started. Yeah, it's a little weird.
On the contemporary academies that I went, painting as a skill is not appreciated both by teachers who teach there or students who are finishing these academies. And everything is this conceptual art. I didn't want to become this conceptual artist.
Oh, a lot of the conceptual artists are also people who already know how to do, they can make the figure, they can make perspective, they can do all of this. And then as soon as they can do it, then they move on to do these other things, but they're able to do it first. But now you have a lot of artists and conceptual artists who don't know how to do anything else. And there's a kind of thinness. There's people now who think they're teaching a lot of, very hard, structured anatomical artwork. And I think in some ways they've lost the ability to know how to do that, how to teach it. Even the people who are teaching anatomy and teaching the figure are losing touch with how to do it. It's a lot of figure drawing classes become anatomy classes, and you get muscle tests and you want to identify muscles and draw the skeleton, and they're losing the ability to orchestrate the entire figure. Now here's Delacroix. Delacroix, he says, if you are not skillful enough to sketch a man jumping out of a window in the time it takes him to fall from the fourth story to the ground, you will never be able to produce great works. He's talking about a figure drawing of what, 3 seconds, the whole figure? You talked about my culture earlier, art education and so on. I was lucky enough to be exposed to these older people who came from that tradition. That was, you look at a Damier drawing, or you look at Delacroix, you look at Jericho, and all those artists, and the best illustrators and the best animators. You know, you look at the Da Vinci drawings of St. George and the Dragon, those roiling little thumbnails of energy, compact energy, from about 1550 all the way to about 1985. That was how that dynamic was very included in figure drawing and instruction. And ever since the sort of Reagan years, things have fallen apart into a greater need for category and have become stunted and atrophied. And so people don't know how to work with that. I was lucky to learn that way, lucky to have people pushing me and giving me the courage to make bad art in order to get to good art. And in class, I like to carry that tradition. It is very much a Western tradition. I'm confident that I can teach anyone to see that way.
Well, what advice would you give to a young artist?
When you say young artist, I find up until about the age of 13, it's important to just sort of encourage their indulgence, just have a kind of guided indulgence. If they want to try something, you go, yeah. And you could say, oh, watch the edge, maybe do this. I would tell them to always use the whole page, always address the entire page, and how important it is to fill the whole page before you get into the tiny bits and pieces. But think of the whole page. I expose them to everything. But if you instruct too much up until the age of 13, they get discouraged. After that, I'd introduce lists and thumbnails, like I still do. Lots of lists and lots of thumbnail drawings, little tiny drawings that you don't show anybody.
I always tell my daughter, and she's 4, and I'm very proud that she's telling other kids now, I'm taking line to a walk.
Oh, nice. You said I'm taking a line for a walk. I also heard, I thought you said I'm taking my mind for a walk. I think they both work.
Yeah. But also, and I told the teachers in the preschool, they give to the kids these drawings that are printed, and they just had to fill the colors. And I told them, oh, can you please not give that to my daughter because she likes to paint herself. The teacher said, oh, but we give it to all the kids. And I asked my daughter, what do you prefer? And I think because all of her friends are painting now drawings that are pre-made, but at home, I just give her the blank paper and a lot of pens. Yesterday, she was doing collage and she got frustrated. She has this need to express something and she tears it apart in 1,000 pieces and then cries. And I told her that's also a process.
There's paintings that, I've worked on, especially earlier, where it goes a year or more, and I take a knife through it and I take, I just know it's not going to work, and I take it off and destroy it, and maybe I'll start over and do it again. And so I get the fresh version. But with regard to process, I like to work now on 4, 5, or maybe 6 paintings at once, because at any chance, any one of them could really turn awful to the point where it can't be resurrected, or it'll have to turn into something else. Sometimes I end up destroying a painting by creating another on top of it. Maybe that's the way it bursts. But I work on, I'll say 4 to 5 at a time, or one main one over time while I work on, 3 or 4 other smaller ones. Because if you just have one thing you're working on, the stakes are too high. Oh my God, that's my only painting. And if it doesn't work, I'm a bad person.
What do you hope people take away from your work?
I hope that some of my work is important enough that when someone else looks at it, they're able to relate to it in their own way to some degree. I hope I want to make an image that's compelling enough that someone will want to try and figure it out, or will see something personal to them. I was in a gallery. They didn't know I was the artist. I was listening. And this woman says, oh, honey, remember that dream I was, this is what I was trying to tell you. This is that dream I was having. And she's referring to a painting I had on the wall. It was a tornado painting with a town and the people. And she goes, remember, and I said this, and there's that. And then the people were, it made me feel successful. I'd done something so personal to me and so important to me. I must have done it well enough that she could identify something that was important to her. And I remember another time, many years separate, it was a woman again, and she knew I was the artist, and she saw the little town with the people and the giant storm, and she goes, so are you on the side of the terrorists? And she saw basically the same motif, but saw something totally different. How do you get that thought, Because they're all going to die. And I said, are they? on the side of the terrace, I'm thinking, recognizing the sort of precarious nature of the world in which we now live. She's like, oh, okay.
Can art be revolutionary in today's society? Or has it been absorbed into market and pop culture and television and mass-produced product?
Leonardo da Vinci were alive now, he would be a filmmaker and maybe not a painter, because he was at the forefront and summit of exploration with regard to what tools could do, right? Well, I can make a painting that doesn't move, or I can make one that does move. It's called a movie screen. We have filmmakers who think those ways. James Cameron is as fascinated with the way a camera works as he is with what we see. I see filmmaking as a direct extension of the Renaissance. But revolutionary, you're talking about how art pertains to the entirety of culture. Interesting. I think it can, and I think it can through all of the avenues you described. It can happen through media and film and painting and drawing in so much as they are exposed through our current mediums. You could have the best painting that no one sees, the criteria for what gets shown and what doesn't. I think we're losing that, and we're losing the audience that can tell the difference between better and worse art. People have been trained to respond to celebrity. Much of what is really significant doesn't get a whole lot of airtime. Oscar Wilde, he said, as soon as you're totally understood and people go, oh, I get it, often means the art is not so good. He said he lived in a constant fear of not being misunderstood. And he's living at the beginning of the modern age, right? And I think he was noticing some of that. A lot of art wins that's very accessible, big and splashy and colorful and obvious. So if you make something a little more complex, it cannot survive the 5 or 10 seconds of exposure because it needs an hour, it needs 2 hours, it needs a week in order to be examined. And that cannot happen in our current news and media cycles. So the art that's revolutionary, I think it's there maybe, but no one will see it. And then people aren't trained to the level of sensitivity needed to digest a really grand concept. In class, people think that there's this huge difference between art and soul, the art and the soul on one side, and then math and analysis and computers on the other. And I said, really? Are you sure? And I said, what about the smartest people from different countries decide to come together and find out who we are, who humanity is? And so they put together a giant project about exploring our origins and our future, and they assemble it and they launch it into the sky like a giant eye that looks out onto the universe to find out where we sit in the middle of things. And what if you call that the Hubble Space Telescope? Isn't that not in so many ways one of the biggest art projects and unifying art projects that's ever been? The Renaissance would have learned to have done that. To me, that was an art project as much as it was as a science project.
Can art exist without context, or is it inherently tied to the socio-political movement in which it's created?
Oh, that's the age-old question. I get into fun little arguments with friends over this. A very learned friend will say that, art depends so much on context. Maybe it's created now and the context of a later time will appreciate it, but it's the context that brings it to light. And yes, I think that is true in terms of it being widespread, but the significance of a Van Gogh painting was 100% significant to Van Gogh, regardless of context. He has a mulberry tree he painted that he's just loved so much, and he wrote his brother, he made a little drawing of it to Theo. He made a little drawing in the corner and said, look, I made a painting of this mulberry tree. And he had little arrows that said, there's orange here, there's blue here. And of course, it doesn't even come across to his own brother in a letter because it's not the painting. It's just a little drawing with arrows where the colors are. And he couldn't get it across, right? It was like 100% revolutionary to him. And yet only later did the context cause everyone else to see it and recognize it and become seduced by his story. So you have someone experiencing personal revolution and personal fulfillment, and others seeing Van Gogh later. There's still here and there are some tribes of humans in nature who are still almost untouched by the technology of the last 1,000 years. They still have grass huts and they still have spears. But let's say you were 100 years ago, you go and find a tribe, some South American tribe who's never been touched by any technology, and you were to put up a Rembrandt self-portrait, a good one, on a tree, or put the Mona Lisa on a tree, I think they will stop or throw a spear at it or be scared of it, or it immediately will affect them as humans. And it won't depend on their context. I think it strikes something universal.
I don't remember what painting it was or what artist, but it was a horse painting. And they show it to a tribesman in Northern Africa, a herdsman of goats or sheep. I don't remember. And he asked them, where is the horse? And he couldn't recognize the horse on the painting. He just saw a blur of colors.
I remember this. Of course, if that happens, it's different than what I was just talking about. It's like if you were to bring them a cell phone and show them the picture on the phone of a horse, you just need to recognize or have the ability to look past the idea of cell phone first. Because of the flatness, he couldn't see past the fact that that was just a flat piece of wood or something, right? It's interesting that he only saw the flat board. The illusion of space was not available. I wonder, though, it would be interesting to take that horse painting and show it to an older tribes person and then also show it maybe to a 5 or 6 year old in his community and see if they see or don't see the same. Maybe the child would see it.
I had a neighbor when I was a kid, and he asked me what I want to be when I grow up. I remember, and I said, I want to be a painter and a writer. And he said, oh, you're going to starve to death. And I was scared of that. And then he said to me something that I will never forget. Why would you paint a landscape when you can go on the mountain and see the landscape?
Oh, shoot, you just struck on something. When I was a very small child, my parents took me to one of these SeaWorld amusement parks. We go to SeaWorld, and I remember we go into the stands, and it's a sunny day, and I'm eating a hot dog, and I have a Coca-Cola, and I'm with my family, and I love my brother and my sister and mom and dad, and we're holding hands, and the huge whale comes out of the water, and gets the prize, and then splash. And, of course, you think the whale's looking only at you. And to me, it was almost like a single sensation. I never knew that something like that was possible. I was noticing so many things at once, and I was so stunned. I remember I wanted to know if it was possible again. It's like you climb the mountain, but then when you come back, you go, wait, that was incredible up there. I saw creation. I saw the ice. I saw the green. I saw the animals. Is it possible again? And that's what bred the art. Imagine someone who could hike up there and then maybe later life, their health, they can't go up there anymore, but they want to know if it's possible again, so they make art to find it again. That's why you make the painting. You're going to SeaWorld that night. I remember we had a little clay, a colored clay called Play-Doh. I couldn't go to sleep because I was making a little sculptures of my family and of the whales and of the stands, and I kept doing it over and over. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. I was so excited. And the next day I got sick in the car because I had my crayons out and I was trying to draw the whole scene in the car. I got motion sickness and I got very sick in the car, but then we cleaned that up and I got home and I brought out the crayons and I was drawing it again and again because I needed to know if that was possible.
It's getting late. My voice is getting lower and lower.
It sounds good. Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, your English is so very good. Over in America, so many people here, they don't know any other language because English got to be the language of international commerce, right? Yeah. And so unfortunately, a lot of people here don't appreciate or have the time anymore because everyone here is very overworked. They don't learn the beauty of other languages. How many languages do you speak? 2 or more?
4.
Over here, very few Americans can say that. I think we lose out.
But I can understand 7.
It's great to speak to someone. I think it increases the sensibilities when you can speak languages and see how the same thing is said differently in each.
Does art have a moral obligation, or it's free from ethical constraints?
I don't think that art has any moral obligation at all. I don't think the art itself has any moral obligation at all, but I think when you're creating something, if you're not being responsible to enough inside you, then it's not art anyway. I think you have to mount something. You have to be coming from some place in order to make something that'll be recognized as art.
Is beauty still relevant in art, or it's had been replaced by other values like political message or social messages?
Beauty is relevant in all art, and I think in the following specific way, okay? We're drowning in so many thin and quick imagery that we're losing an audience who can perceive it. In class, I related it to wine. You go to dinner, there might be a glass of wine, and you go, it's kind of smooth, and there's blackberry. There's 2 elements, smooth and blackberry. It's very rare, but if someone is lucky enough to get a mid-century Chateau Lafite or with something, and you take it in and you taste it, and all of a sudden you're transported because you taste blackberry, you smell the air as if you're walking through a new forest, or are up against the ground and you smell the moss and the minerals in the ground. All these things are going on at once in this one swallow of wine. It's a single swallow, but all of a sudden it's hitting all these different areas, all these different buttons and stimuli. As you swallow, you start to smell new leather as you breathe in, and it goes down and you go, wow. And you go, wait a minute, this is a very rare thing. And once you sensing so many individual experiences all at the same time, maybe you start to see the shape of whatever it is that might contain all of those. Maybe the shape of life or existence. You see the edges of something that you do not get when you just have a good wine that is very smooth, it's like heavy, and there's a hint of blackberry. There's so much loose money at the top of the very wealthy and rich world. They're trying to produce wine so fast that they're not aging it as long, that people are getting used to a downgraded product as something that gets praised, and they're not having these experiences. They're losing touch with what's possible. And it's same thing is happening in painting and in art. Like the Da Vinci sketch of the Virgin in St. Anne, Virgin on the Rocks or whatever it is, it's in London. Some of the body parts are just sort of gestured in, like Delacroix, just sort of gestured in. The faces are very, very refined and almost have an ivory quality to the skin, yet they also have a real psychology to them. Then you go to an area that's all about light and shadow. Then you go to an area where all the rocks and plants are described across the bottom, almost like it's a separate picture of a landscape. And you start seeing all these things firing at once. With wine, what I just described of that Da Vinci drawing, that is what makes something beautiful, that transportational experience of discovering something that's possible, something more than what you thought was possible. That is what makes it beautiful. The Mona Lisa is probably 6 individual experiences of something at 100% all at once, if you really take time with it. Vermeer, you can feel the temperature in the room and you can hear the clink of the metal, and there's a softness and an intimacy, and you start to find yourself almost hypnotized by the intimacy there if you spend time with it. How much of the audience can do that anymore, or when it happens can appreciate that?
First time when I saw Vermeer, it was the painting of a maid with the milk. I saw the reproduction in the art history class. I was second year of high school. The teacher was speaking about Vermeer, and this painting was in front of us in the book. I almost could taste the milk.
Yes, I was just going to say, I remember, yes, I could taste the milk. I think of drinking milk goes through my mind. The experience gets repeated looking at that picture. And the painting's ability to arouse that in us, to make us feel that alive, I think that for me, that's my definition of beautiful. Having that wine, I'm walking in the forest in Lord of the Rings or something, You're like, wow.
Do you like Tolkien?
Yes. I mean, I read those books when I was in school and I loved them, and I made drawings, and I got the Tolkien's book of his own drawings and paintings of some of it. Yeah, I love it.
Last 3 questions.
Yes.
How would you like to be remembered?
I imagine someone down the road, hopefully, if some of my images, paintings get seen, that my paintings has the possibility to renew life for a few days for someone, that they connect with it and go, oh, hey, wait, yeah. Hey, maybe that guy was onto something. Anyone can hope for in art is to have the experience of their art stay relevant through the ages.
If you could have a dinner with anybody in the world, even a character from a book, historical character, doesn't matter, who would it be and why?
There's so many come to mind. I think right now I would enjoy to have dinner with not Stephen Hawking, but the other person he worked with is a cosmologist named Leonard Susskind, and he and Stephen Hawking worked on black holes and the structure of the universe. But I'm sure that after we're done talking, I'll think of many, many others. Let's say if I was to have dinner with Leonardo da Vinci, I'd say after dinner I would show him a movie and watch him just trip out. I'd pick a movie, Apocalypse Now or whatever it is or something.
Alien.
And just have him go, what the hell,
The final question is, what is art?
That which results from our inherent need to realize.
Wow, what a good answer.
I just came up with that, but I think that's it.
It was a pleasure talking to you, John. I'm very happy that I spoke with you.
I feel very honored to have been asked, because you obviously come from a background of wonderful sensibilities and exposure to art, and for you to value me as a subject is quite an honor.
I hope we do this again, and I wish you a good day. We talk soon.